started with a voicemail. "Hey sweetie, it's Mom. Something weird is going on with my retirement account. I tried to check the balance and it's gone. Totally empty. The bank said there was a withdrawal, but I didn't authorize anything. Could you call me back, please? I'm freaking out a little." She sounded frantic, like the world had tilted under her feet and she didn't know which way was up. Her voice cracked on the word empty. A part of me, a small, shrinking part, felt a twinge of guilt hearing her like that. But the rest of me just sat there on my couch, phone in hand, legs tucked under a blanket, sipping lukewarm chamomile tea while the evening news played in the background. Steady. Silent. Because I already knew what happened. She just didn't know I was the one who did it. The transfer hadn't been impulsive. It wasn't some midnight revenge fantasy fueled by rage. It was surgical, precise, months in the making. I'd waited patiently, letting the resentment settle, harden, crystallize into strategy. Because when someone calls you a backup kid to your face, something inside you breaks and then sharpens. But before I tell you how I cashed out her secret IRA, and what I did with the money, I need to take you back. Back to the moment I realized I was just a placeholder in my own family. A second draft they never intended to publish. Back up. This story isn't about theft, or even revenge. It's about recognition. Recognition that some people only see your worth when it benefits them. That being biologically related doesn't entitle anyone to your loyalty. That sometimes, choosing yourself means walking away, quietly, intentionally, and with receipts. So before we get into it, tell me, have you ever had to stand up to the very people who were supposed to protect you? Have you ever had to draw a boundary so sharp it bled? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever been the overlooked one, the backup, smash that like button. Because this story, it's for you. Now let me take you back to the dinner table conversation that changed everything. Dinner was spaghetti and silence. My mom always made a show of being a traditional parent. Family meals, cloth napkins, and a no-phones rule she herself broke constantly to check Pinterest or text my brother. That night, she stirred her glass of wine absent-mindedly while my stepdad scrolled on his iPad. Across the table, I pushed marinara-soaked noodles around my plate, heart hammering louder than my fork. I had rehearsed this moment in the mirror 100 times. I even wrote a note in my phone titled, "How to Ask Without Sounding Ungrateful." "Hey, can I ask you guys something?" My mom glanced up like I had interrupted a meeting. "Sure, sweetheart. What's up?" I cleared my throat, willing my voice to sound casual. Do I have a college fund? Like Brandon did. The room didn't fall silent. It just got quieter in a more dangerous way. My stepdad's fingers stopped mid-scroll. My mom blinked slowly like I had just asked if we were aliens. Then she let out a little sigh. A disappointed, annoyed sigh that felt like it had been waiting years to escape. "Well," she said, setting down her wine. "Brandon's was different." That was her opening. A justification disguised as an explanation. The kind where you already know you're not getting what you came for. She continued. "We had just gotten married when he was born. Your father and I." "Stepfather," I corrected gently, more out of instinct than anything. She waved it off. "Whatever. The point is, we were more financially prepared. We started saving for him early." "You were." She paused, reaching for words that wouldn't make her sound like a monster. But honesty slipped out instead. "You were unexpected." "Unexpected," I repeated, eyes narrowing. "Yeah," she said, as if that should be obvious. "We didn't plan on having another. Things were tighter. Life got busier. We couldn't just duplicate everything for you." I waited for her to land on the part where I still mattered. Where the backup plan still had a plan. He didn't. My stepdad chuckled. "You know, it's like that old joke. The second kid's the insurance policy." My mom smirked. "Or the backup kid." She laughed. I blinked at her, stunned. "Wait, is that what I am to you?" She looked confused, like I was overreacting. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. It's just an expression. Obviously we love you. But it didn't feel like love. Felt like logistics. Like I was a box to check off in a family that had already been completed. Love doesn't sound like. We couldn't just duplicate everything. Love isn't a spreadsheet that gets edited down. And in that moment, something inside me fractured. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like a second draft, but it was the first time they confirmed it out loud. I excused myself from the table and went upstairs, closing the door gently behind me. Then I sat on my bed, back pressed against the wall, and realized something that would reshape the next 3 years of my life. I wasn't the backup kid. I was the buried lead. They just didn't know it yet. Graduation week was supposed to be one of the biggest moments of my life. I'd worked hard for it. AP classes, after-school jobs, tutoring on weekends, the kind of grind that leaves you sleep-deprived but proud. I was the first in my family to get accepted into a top-tier university on a merit scholarship. No legacy points, no family donations. Just me showing up and proving my worth. But you wouldn't have known it by looking at my house that week. The living room wasn't filled with cards or congratulatory banners. The kitchen wasn't stocked with cake or celebration balloons. What it was filled with was travel brochures. Stacks of them. Luxury cruise packages, to be exact. 7 nights in the Caribbean, my mom said dreamily one morning as I came down the stairs. She was sipping coffee from her boy mom mug while circling prices in glossy catalogs. It's our gift to Brandon for getting into grad school. I stood in the doorway, frozen. Wait, what? She didn't even glance up. Brandon's been accepted into that entrepreneurship program in Austin. Remember, it's his dream. We wanted to do something big. I nodded slowly. So no party for me? She blinked like I'd broken her train of thought. For what? My graduation, I said, voice small. Oh, sweetie. You know we're proud of you, but we just don't have the budget to throw 2 major events back to back. Maybe we'll take you out for dinner next week. Dinner next week. For 4 years of effort. 4 years of carrying my own weight while they threw every ounce of support behind my brother. And now, when I crossed that finish line alone, they were planning deckchair cocktails and sunset buffets without me. I couldn't even respond. I just walked into the garage where Brandon's new car, the one they'd co-signed and partially paid for, sat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. That was the moment it all clicked. I wasn't an afterthought. I was an investment that never matured. And they had already cashed out. That night, I sat at my desk scrolling through college websites, mentally reworking my future. Community college first. Transfer later. Scholarships and loans. I figured it out. Because clearly I was on my own. And then something happened that changed everything. While helping my mom troubleshoot her new laptop, her old one crashed 2 weeks before the cruise. She logged into a financial dashboard and forgot to log out. I didn't mean to snoop. But a single folder caught my eye. Arialt. Brandon Future Emergency Fund. The name alone made my chest tighten. My hand hovered over the mouse. Click. 6 figures. Sitting untouched. Grown over the years. Nestled quietly under her name. And mine. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. That was the moment I stopped crying over my college fund. And started plotting my next move. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the glow of my laptop screen in the dark. The numbers from that IRA account burned into my vision like an afterimage. $162,374.33. That's what it showed. A tidy fortune quietly accumulating for over a decade. For Brandon. The same Brandon who partied his way through undergrad and needed 3 tries to pass his driver's test. The same Brandon who got bailed out of a failed sneaker resale business without consequence, because at least he's trying. And the same Brandon who had his entire grad school tuition paid up front, while I was told to figure it out. At first I assumed I'd misread something, that it was a glitch, that maybe I didn't understand how IRAs worked. But the truth was right there in the account metadata. Primary account holder, Eleanor J. Hartman. Secondary account holder, Natalie A. Hartman. Name. I scrolled further. There was again my social security number. My date of birth. The account had been set up when I was 14. I remembered vaguely signing some papers at the kitchen table while my mom promised it was just for tax stuff. I'd been too young to ask questions. She'd been too confident to offer explanations. But now it was my legal entry point. My signature on that paper had given me full access. She never thought I'd notice. Never thought I'd check. Never thought I mattered enough to. The betrayal stung. Not just because of the money but because of the planning. Foresight. She'd created a financial safety net for my brother and added me to it. Not for protection but for convenience. I was a tool. A legal bypass. I closed the tab, opened another, and began researching. Federal regulations. Shared ownership. Custodial accounts. Transfer protocols. Everything. And with every article I read, the power shifted. This wasn't stealing. This was accessing. The law recognized me as an account holder. Cool. Authorized. I could withdraw every cent, and no one could legally stop me. The realization sat heavy on my chest, not because I wasn't ready, but because I knew once I made that move, there was no going back. No illusion to hide behind. No chance at playing the good daughter card again. I had always been the backup plan. Now I was done being the fallback. That night I started drafting a plan. Not out of revenge but out of necessity. I made spreadsheets. Made calls. I applied for accounts. I opened a $529 college savings plan in my name. Separate from my parents. Felt surgical. Cold. And for the first time in a long time, powerful. Because if they weren't going to invest in me, I'd invest in myself, with their help. Whether they liked it or not. The moment that pushed me from planning to execution didn't come during a fight or some dramatic explosion. Came during brunch. Sunday. Late August. One of those two bright mornings where the sunlight makes everything feel falsely cheerful. My mom had insisted we all go out, her, my stepdad, Brandon, and me, to celebrate the end of summer. What we were actually celebrating was Brandon moving to Austin for grad school. She picked the kind of overpriced bistro that served waffles with edible flowers and called it modern rustic. I sat across from Brandon as he scrolled through apartments on his phone. This one's got a rooftop pool. $2,000 a month, but Mom says she'll cover the deposit and first 3 months. My mom beamed. Of course. You need to feel settled before classes start. My fork paused midair. Brandon didn't even look up. And I'll need that car insurance covered while I'm down there. Can't Uber everywhere, right? My stepdad grunted in agreement. He'll pay it back when his startup takes off. My heart hammered in my chest. What startup? Brandon smirked. Me and Gabe are pitching an app idea to his cousin. Something about tracking gym check-ins and rewards. Don't worry about it. My mom clapped her hands. See. He's thinking big. I laughed. Loud. I didn't mean to, it just escaped. For heads turned toward me. What's funny? My mom asked. I set my fork down carefully. You're covering his rent, his deposit, his car, and now, his imaginary company? It's called support, she replied tightly. That's what family does. I leaned in. And what did family do when I got accepted to 3 universities and asked about financial help? She flinched just for a moment. Then came the dagger. You've always been independent, Natalie. We didn't think you needed as much. No, I said slowly, my voice calm. You didn't think I mattered as much. The table went quiet. My stepdad sighed. This again. Brandon shrugged. Not our fault you didn't ask sooner. My mom looked irritated. Can we not do this here? I'm trying to have a nice meal. I sat back in my chair, watching the 3 of them go back to their avocado toast and mimosas like I hadn't said a thing. Like I was invisible. And that's when it clicked. They weren't going to change. Ever. And I was done waiting for them to see me. The next morning I made the withdrawal. Took 10 minutes. I transferred $10,000 directly into my new education savings account. The rest I split. part into a secure high-yield savings account, part into a CD with early access options. Everything was traceable, legal, precise. No message, no warning, no dramatic goodbye. I didn't even flinch when I clicked submit. Because that brunch wasn't just the final straw. It was the confirmation I'd been waiting for. I wasn't their backup. I was their blind spot. And now, they'd feel it. It didn't take long. 3 days to be exact. I was walking out of my campus library, a stack of textbooks pressed to my chest, when my phone started buzzing non-stop. I ignored the first 2 calls, both from Mom, but when the third one came in within minutes, followed by a rapid string of texts, I knew she'd seen it. I sat on a bench near the parking lot and opened the messages. Natalie, something is wrong with the account. Did you touch anything? The IRA is empty. Did you see anything strange when you helped with the laptop? Please call me now. The desperation was immediate, and honestly, a little theatrical. I didn't reply. Few hours later, my voicemail filled up. Her voice cracked through the speaker, shaky and panicked. I don't know what's going on, but this isn't funny. This is our future we're talking about. That account was private. It wasn't meant for anyone else. Paused the message. Wasn't meant for anyone else. I replayed that phrase twice. The irony could have choked me. That account had my name on it. I had paid attention during all those years of being ignored. I knew better than to act on emotion. So I took my time. I documented everything. Every transaction, every statement, every screenshot proving co-ownership. If she tried to claim I hacked it or moved funds illegally, I'd bury her in the truth, because this wasn't just about the money. This was about finally standing up in a family that had taught me to sit down and be grateful for crumbs. Later that night, my stepdad called. It went to voicemail. Again. Listen, Natalie. We're trying to stay calm here, but this is serious. You can't just move retirement funds. That money was allocated. Allocated. They'd planned out every cent of that account. For Brandon's future, for their vacations, for their safety net. And they assumed I'd never notice. Or worse, never question it. But they never planned for me to realize something critical. They didn't own me. Their silence, their dismissiveness, their spreadsheet love. It wasn't currency anymore. And I was done accepting IOUs in place of dignity. The following week, I quietly moved out. I didn't announce it. No passive-aggressive Facebook post. No family email. I left behind a clean room, an empty closet, and a folded note on my old desk that read, I figured things out. That was all. I checked into my small student apartment 2 cities away. It wasn't much. Thin walls, creaky floors, and a mattress that remembered every spine it had ever supported. But it was mine. Mine, funded by what was legally mine. And as I unpacked my books onto a flimsy shelf and plugged in my reading lamp, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. They might have seen me as a backup. But now I was the one writing the playbook. And they were scrambling for the rules. The family group chat had been mostly dead for months. A few occasional memes from my aunt, holiday reminders, and the usual happy birthday. Gifts that felt more like obligations than love. But the day after I moved, it lit up like a dumpster fire soaked in kerosene. It started with a message from my mom. Eleanor Hartman. Natalie, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Then another. Eleanor Hartman. I just got off the phone with Fidelity. They confirmed you authorized the withdrawal. Do you realize what you've done? And then came the guilt grenade. Eleanor Hartman. I don't even recognize you anymore. I stared at the screen. She didn't recognize me. That was rich. She never tried to see me in the first place. Then Brandon jumped in, guns blazing. Brandon Hartman, wow. Just wow. You stole from our family. From whom? Brandon Hartman. She trusted you with that account because she thought you were responsible. And you go full psycho. Brandon Hartman. You've always been jealous of me. Admit it. That one made me laugh out loud. Jealous. Of what? A man-child whose success was built on their coddling and credit cards. Brandon couldn't even remember to submit a rent deposit on time. Meanwhile, I was organizing my fall semester, managing a part-time job, and creating a real life, with zero help. And now, because I had finally drawn a line, I was the villain. The messages kept coming. Accusations, guilt trips, thinly veiled threats like, "You know this could have legal consequences, right?" I wanted to respond with screenshots of the account's ownership. Or with a photo of the text Brandon sent me just 2 years ago. "LOL, can you spot me $40 till next week?" But I didn't. Because silence was louder. I exited the group chat, blocked their numbers, disabled notifications. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. Let them spin. Let them talk. Let them cry to relatives and neighbors and the Facebook echo chamber. Because deep down they weren't mad about the money. They were mad that I had figured out how to leave their game, while using the very rules they taught me. They were mad that I had dared to see myself as worthy of something more. They were mad that their backup plan didn't stay in her place. I sat on the edge of my twin bed in that tiny student apartment and felt the quiet wrap around me like armor. No drama. No screaming. Just peace. And that peace was priceless. It was a Thursday afternoon when she showed up. I'd just gotten back from my campus job. My hands still smelled faintly of espresso from wiping down the cafe counters. The floor of my tiny apartment creaked as I kicked off my shoes and checked the mailbox. Then I heard it. Knock. Not the impatient kind, not frantic or pounding. Light. Almost rehearsed. I peeked through the peephole and froze. It was her. My mom stood in the hallway like a misplaced museum exhibit. Flawless hair, designer coat, a soft pink scarf draped over her shoulder, and in her hands, a Tupperware dish of lasagna. Seriously, lasagna. I didn't open the door right away. I just stared, half expecting the image to glitch. But she didn't vanish. She just stood there, biting her lip like the weight of her performance was getting heavy. Eventually I opened the door just a crack. She gave me a watery smile. "Hi, sweetheart. Why are you here?" Yes. My voice was level. No anger. Just curiosity. She held up the lasagna. "I thought you might be hungry." I didn't move. She tried again. "Can I come in? Please?" I opened the door the rest of the way, but I didn't say yes. She walked in like she'd been invited. She looked around, eyes sweeping the mismatched furniture and second-hand rug. "It's cozy," she offered, the way someone might describe a funeral home. I said nothing. She set the lasagna on the counter and turned to me with a sigh that had been building for 3 days. "Natalie, what you did. It hurt. It really did." I raised an eyebrow. "You emptied the account without saying a word. Do you know how that made me feel?" My silence made her squirm. Her voice wobbled just slightly. "That money wasn't meant for now. It was for later. For when Brandon needed it." There it was. Still him. Always him. "So you did set it aside for Brandon," I said, more to clarify than to accuse. She blinked, caught off guard. "Well, not exclusively. But you're so capable. You always have been. Brandon he needs a safety net. And I don't." Yes. She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "But I'm still your mother." I crossed my arms. A mother who left her daughter to take out loans and work double shifts while setting aside 6 figures for her son. "That's not fair," she said, voice rising. "No," I replied. "What's not fair is asking for my forgiveness only after your plan unraveled." The silence between us grew thick, dense with years of swallowed pain. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally. "I came to reconnect." I pointed to the lasagna. "You came to make it look like you care." She stared at me. And for the first time I think she realized it wasn't working. The guilt. Tears. The cheap attempts at maternal redemption wrapped in foil. I wasn't that girl anymore. "You should go," I said quietly. She lingered like she wanted a hug or a scene or a moment she could claim was healing. But I gave her none of it. Left. The lasagna stayed on the counter, untouched. Later that night I threw it in the trash. Still cold, still wrapped. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel wasteful. Felt free. After my mom left, silence took over. But it wasn't the kind that presses on your chest and makes your thoughts feel too loud. It was a different kind. Softer. Like the hum of a fridge at night. Steady, present, and oddly comforting. That weekend, I cleaned my apartment top to bottom. Not because it was messy, but because I needed to reclaim the space she'd stepped into. I tossed the lasagna container without ever opening it. I scrubbed the counter like I was erasing years of overlooked birthdays and conditional love. And then I sat down at my tiny fold-out kitchen table and opened my laptop. It was time to build something better. The next few weeks were all about quiet work. Focused on classes. Nailed every assignment. Picked up extra shifts at the cafe. I made a budgeting spreadsheet that even the IRS would admire. And every dollar I spent from that account, the one with my name on it, I treated like an investment in my freedom. Zoe, my best friend from high school, was the first to check in. Not with drama. Not with prying questions. Just a text that read, "Still breathing. Still standing. Let me know which you need help with today." She showed up with cupcakes the next night and crashed on my futon. No questions, just Netflix, laughter, and the warmth of someone who had always seen me. Then came my professor, Dr. Shaw. She'd noticed my shift in focus. Invited me to apply for a competitive mentorship program. Said she saw leadership potential in me. I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever looked at me and said, "You could lead." And slowly something started to shift. Not with fanfare. Not with grand gestures. But with consistency. People showed up. People who didn't ask me to shrink. Who didn't talk over me. Who didn't only remember my name when they needed something. People who didn't call me a backup. I started referring to them quietly as my real family. Not because of biology, but because they made space for me. Because they let me take up space without earning it first. One night, after a long shift and back-to-back classes, I got home and found a handwritten note taped to my door. Zoe's handwriting. "You're not a backup, Nat. You're the main character. You've always been. Took you long enough to figure it out." I cried for the first time in weeks. Not out of pain, but because I knew she was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebirth. I had spent years waiting to be prioritized. Now I was learning to prioritize myself. And in that tiny, creaky apartment with the cheap blinds and the second-hand furniture, surrounded by people who chose me without obligation, I finally felt seen. Not as a placeholder, but as a person with power. And for the first time I didn't feel alone. Felt new. The morning of graduation, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the blinds and the soft buzz of my alarm playing one of those lo-fi beats I always used to study. No one knocked on my door. No one yelled for me to hurry or reminded me to iron my gown. And strangely, I didn't miss any of that. I got dressed slowly. Intentionally. Black gown, gold cords, and a pair of worn heels that had walked me through too many all-nighters and coffee-fueled breakdowns to count. My hair was pinned back by Zoe, who barged in carrying a paper bag with my favorite breakfast sandwich and a bottle of sparkling apple cider. "Toast now, cry later," she declared, handing me the drink. "Who's crying?" I asked, laughing as I blinked back tears. She didn't push. Just clinked her cup against mine. "To the backup kid who rebuilt the whole damn engine." We walked to the auditorium together. Not a limousine in sight, no flowers from family, no awkward photos with people who'd forgotten my major. Just Zoe holding my hand and waving a cardboard sign that read, "Magna cum loudly." Yeah, she did that. As we waited in line to cross the stage, I checked my phone out of habit. One unread message. "Good luck today. I saw the university post about you on Facebook. I hope you know we're proud." It was from my mother. No apology. No admission. Just a vague attempt to take credit from the sidelines. I didn't respond. Because pride means nothing when it's only sent through screens. When it's absent in the moments that matter. And today mattered. They called my name. Natalie and Hartman, magna cum laude. The cheers weren't thunderous, but they were honest. Zoe, my professor, and two of my cafe co-workers stood up and clapped like I just won an Olympic medal. I smiled, not for the audience, not for the cameras, but for myself, because I knew how much it took to get there. Not just the classes, but the silence, the rebuilding. The nights I cried on the bathroom floor wondering if I'd made a mistake. The emails from my brother filled with blame. The moments I almost responded, almost explained, but didn't. That stage wasn't just about a diploma. It was proof that I had made it through every closed door and every dinner table dismissal and still stood tall. They hadn't come. And for the first time, I was glad. Because the seat they would have filled stayed open. Reminder. That absence doesn't always hurt. Sometimes it heals. A week after graduation it arrived. The subject line was simple. Hope you're well, from Dad. I stared at it for a full 2 minutes before clicking. We weren't the email type. My stepfather had never written me anything that didn't involve a forwarded bill or some lecture about financial responsibility. But this felt different. Natalie, I know we haven't spoken much since everything. I didn't agree with how your mom handled things. I told her that, for the record. I wanted to reach out sooner, but she asked me not to. Said she needed time. I gave her that. I saw the university post. I didn't know you were graduating magna. That's impressive. Sincerely. I hope you're proud of yourself. You should be. Also, I'd like to ask a favor. It's not easy for me to say this, but I need help. I've been diagnosed with a heart condition. It's manageable, but the specialist recommends surgery within the year. The insurance only covers part of it, and the rest is more than we can afford right now. I know about the account. Your mother told me what happened. But I also know that you're smart and capable. Maybe you can help us figure something out. I don't expect you to pay. Just guide us through options. You always were the practical one. Please think about it. Miss. I read it 3 times. The first time I felt anger. That familiar burn in my chest that came every time someone tried to guilt me back into place. The second time I felt nothing. Just numbness. Exhaustion. The weight of being the one everyone came to only after the ground gave way beneath them. But the third time, I felt something else entirely. Control. Because this time I held the power. And they knew it. Not just financially. Emotionally. I had proven I could exist without them, grow without them, succeed without their scaffolding. And now, when illness pulled the rug out from under their carefully curated lives, I was the one with a safety net. It wasn't a request for connection. It was a request for strategy. A plea to the very daughter they'd once deemed a backup plan. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I printed the email and pinned it to my vision board, not out of pride but as proof. Proof that the narrative had flipped. That I wasn't invisible. I was the person they needed now. And I hadn't even decided if they were worth saving. I didn't reply to the email. Not that day. Not the next. Not even after rereading it during a late-night bout of insomnia, the words blurring with the glow of my laptop screen. Instead, I did what I should have done years ago. I turned to people who actually showed up. Zoe was the first. We met at our favorite cafe, the one we'd claimed as our spot long before I moved out. We took our usual table by the window. She knew something was off the moment I sat down without ordering anything. "You're doing that thing," she said, narrowing her eyes. "I have a secret but I don't want to say it out loud thing." I handed her the printed email. She read it in silence, her thumb running along the edge of the paper like she could smooth it out, fix it, turn it into something else. When she looked up, her expression was somewhere between exhaustion and rage. "They always come back when they need something," she muttered. "Don't they?" I didn't respond. 'Cause she was right. "Let me guess," she added. "You feel guilty." I nodded, staring down at my chipped coffee mug. "I don't want to. But yeah." She leaned forward. "You know what's wild, Nat? If you hadn't pulled that money when you did, they wouldn't be asking, they'd be expecting. They'd be assuming it was already theirs." That was the part that stung. because deep down I knew she was right. They wouldn't have thanked me. They would have called it doing your part. I left that conversation still uncertain, but less tangled. Then I talked to Dr. Shaw, the professor who had become my unofficial mentor. I showed her the email during office hours, her soft jazz playlist playing faintly in the background. She read it once and asked just one question. What would helping them cost you? And I didn't have an answer. Not yet. That night I called Parker, an old classmate from my business ethics seminar, now a paralegal, and asked what my legal responsibilities were. None, he said flatly. You have zero obligation. But if you choose to help, set terms. Written terms. Make it formal. Make it clear. No room for guilt or manipulation. By the end of that week, I had a file on my desktop titled Boundaries. Inside, referral options, financial aid forms, affordable surgery programs, and a template for a conditional support agreement. Because if I was going to engage, I wasn't stepping back into their world. They'd have to meet me in mine. One defined by truth, by limits, by self-respect. I walked into Dr. Klein's office with a tight chest and a tighter jaw. Her space had always been calm, diffused lavender, soft lighting, walls painted a shade somewhere between storm gray and peace. There was always a pitcher of water, but I never touched it. I liked knowing it was there, available but not expected, just like I wanted to be. She glanced up from her notes and gave that practiced, open smile of hers. It's been a while. He nodded. I thought I was done needing this room. And yet, she said, gesturing gently, here you are. I didn't waste time. I handed her the printed email, the one from Thomas, my stepfather. She read it quietly, then folded it once and set it on the armrest between us, like it was delicate. What brought this in today? She asked. I don't know what to do, I admitted. He's sick. He needs help. And suddenly I'm the one with the connections, the resources, the power. And that makes you uncomfortable. Exhaled. It makes me furious. She nodded, no judgment. Furious at them. Or at yourself for considering helping. I didn't answer right away. Both, I finally said. They made me feel like an afterthought for years. And now they show up with illness and apologies and this unspoken expectation that I'll be better than they were. And will you? She asked. I looked at her. I want to be. She leaned forward slightly. Let's talk about what better looks like. Does it mean unconditional forgiveness? Financial support? Taking him to appointments? I shook my head. No. I'm not doing all that. Then maybe, she said gently, it's time to separate being better from being available. That landed. Because somewhere in me, I'd confused healing with self-sacrifice. I don't want to be the kind of person who lets someone suffer just because they hurt me first, I said. Empathy doesn't mean exposure, she replied. You can care from a distance. Forgiveness isn't the same as re-entry. I sat with that. She reached over and slid the email back to me. Maybe the question isn't do I help, but rather, can I help without losing myself? I looked down at the folded paper, felt heavier now, not because of guilt, but because I realized I had the chance to decide who I wanted to be in this next chapter. Not based on what they did, but based on what I could live with, not what I owed, but what I chose. That session didn't give me an answer, but it gave me something more important. Clarity. I left with one truth echoing in my head. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering and choosing peace anyway. On my terms. I hadn't texted Vanessa in over 3 years. Not after the wedding I wasn't invited to. Not during my recovery. Not even after I saw the photo of her holding their family dog with a caption, "Only child energy nail polished." I told myself I'd blocked her to protect my peace. But the truth was, I didn't want to know if she'd changed. Because if she hadn't, it would hurt all over again. Still, after the session with Dr. Klein, something gnawed at me. A thread I hadn't pulled. I typed the message 10 times before I sent it. Vanessa. It's Natalie. I'm not here to fight. Just want to talk. Coffee. You pick the place. The response came 10 minutes later. Please. She chose a small cafe in Cambridge. Public, neutral, quiet. I arrived early, palms sweaty, thoughts racing. I almost left 3 times before she walked in. She looked different. Older. Not just in age but in energy. Her makeup was minimal. Hair tied up in a messy bun. Clothes plain. No designer bag. No acrylic nails tapping on a phone. Her confidence had shrunk, curled into something less performative. "Hey," she said, voice soft, unsure. "Hey," I echoed. We sat down. Silence held court between us for a while. Then I started. "They came to me. About Thomas. The surgery." She nodded. "Yeah. I figured. There was no venom. Just exhaustion." I studied her. "So you're still talking to them?" She laughed, but it wasn't joyful. "Barely. I live with a roommate in Somerville now. Work retail. Brandon left me with most of the debt. Mom says it's a phase." I didn't know what to say. She beat me to it. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "Back then, about the wedding." Tensed. That was a scar I didn't let people touch. She stared at her coffee like it had answers. "Mom told me you had some medical stuff going on, but she downplayed it. Said it was routine. So I didn't ask. I didn't want to ask. Because I'd already booked the venue, and I was terrified that if it overlapped, they might, skip it." She looked up. "Is watery." I didn't want to be second. For once. The honesty felt like a gut punch. "So you scheduled it knowing there was a risk?" She nodded. "I told myself if it was serious, they'd come to you anyway. But I also knew Mom wouldn't change the plan. Not for you." My throat tightened. "You were okay with that?" "No," she whispered. "But I was used to it. Just like you were used to being invisible, I was used to being the show." We sat there for a while, the weight of our mutual wounds settling between us. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know it doesn't fix anything. But I am." I believed her. Not because she sounded perfect, but because, for once, she wasn't performing. She was just Vanessa. Flawed. Wounded. And maybe finally ready to be real. "I'm not promising a clean slate," I said. She nodded. "I'm not asking for one. But maybe," I added, "we try something different. This time without them." Her eyes softened. "I'd like that. If you had told me 3 years ago that I'd be meeting my parents not out of obligation, but by choice, and on my terms, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I was, planning a meeting not with the fear of a child desperate for approval, but with the clarity of a woman who finally knew her worth." The decision came quietly, a few days after coffee with Vanessa. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, phone muted, a notepad filled with scribbles and underlines. Options. Limits. Conditions. Clarity. I wasn't doing this for closure. I wasn't doing it to mend old wounds. I was doing it because I'd become the adult in the room. And that meant offering help only in a way that protected the life I'd built without them. First I met with Zoe. We hashed through every scenario over Thai food and legal pad notes. She played devil's advocate. What if they cry? What if they twist it back on you? What if they make you the problem? I just smiled. Then they'll get a polite smile and a handout packet. She blinked. "You made packets." I pulled one out of my folder. A stapled document with resources, surgical financial aid programs, medical social workers, and a breakdown of alternative specialists. Zoe stared at it like I'd built a rocket in my living room. "You really don't miss." Next, I called Parker, who had already helped me structure a conditional aid agreement. An actual, notarized contract that laid out exactly what I would and wouldn't cover if I chose to contribute anything financially. "You sure you want to hand this to them?" he asked. "I'm not handing it to them," I said. "I'm presenting it. In a neutral space. Not my home. Not theirs." I booked a private room at a quiet restaurant along the Charles River. It had big windows, quiet acoustics, and most importantly, an exit that was closer to my side of the table. Finally, I met with Dr. Klein again. I laid it all out, the terms, the preparation, the packets. She nodded, impressed but cautious. You've done the work, Natalie. Just remember, helping them doesn't erase what happened. I know. And their reaction isn't a measure of your growth. Your strength isn't in what you offer them. It's in what you refuse to sacrifice. I left her office that day feeling lighter. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of them. Not of their disappointment. Not of their judgment. Because this wasn't about being the good daughter anymore. It was about being a whole person, with boundaries, with power, and with every intention of protecting the life I'd built. I texted Vanessa. Meeting is set. Like you there. She replied immediately. Wouldn't miss it. As I zipped my folder shut that night, a quiet calm settled over me. This wasn't revenge. This was resolution. And it was happening on my terms. They arrived 5 minutes late. My mother swept in first, all pearls and perfume, like she was attending a charity gala and not a conversation about a life or death surgery. My stepfather followed, slower, smaller than I remembered. His blazer a little too big now, as if illness had started shrinking him from the inside out. Vanessa was already there, seated beside me, her spine straight, her expression unreadable. We met in a private room at a riverfront restaurant, neutral territory. I had picked the seat closest to the door, just in case. My mother barely looked at Vanessa. She glanced around and gave a brittle smile. Well, this is lovely. Let's get to it, I said, calm and direct. Thomas cleared his throat, trying on the voice he used for business meetings. Natalie, we appreciate you taking the time. We know things haven't been easy between us. Stop, I said gently but firmly, opening the folder in front of me. This isn't a reconciliation dinner. This is a presentation of facts and boundaries. My mother blinked. Excuse me. I slid the first document across the table. This is information on a clinical trial for your condition. It's fully funded for qualifying patients. I spoke with a medical liaison, and they believe you're a strong candidate. My stepfather glanced at it, eyes narrowing. What about Dr. Evans? My cardiologist says. I'm not coordinating with private doctors, I interrupted. I'm not making phone calls. I'm not pulling strings. These are your options. They're real, they're vetted, and they're independent of me. I placed the second sheet down. This outlines a list of support resources. Grants, financial counseling, insurance navigation. All legitimate. All public. My mother stiffened. So, that's it. You're just handing us papers. I looked her in the eye. I'm giving you a lifeline. But not my life. Then I placed the final document between us. A formal agreement. My conditions for partial financial assistance. Up to $20,000, strictly for medical use. Released only upon receipt of documentation. All mediated through a third-party fiduciary. My stepfather's face turned red. You're treating this like a business transaction. No, I said quietly. You did that. Years ago. When you made me the backup plan. Vanessa spoke for the first time. She's not cutting you off. She's offering you a path. One she had to find alone. My mother stared at her like she was a traitor. You're siding with her. Vanessa folded her hands. No. I'm standing with her. There's a difference. Thomas leaned back, shaking his head. Unbelievable. My mother's voice trembled. We're your parents. He nodded. And I'm your daughter. The one you left to survive alone. A long, sharp silence. Then I stood. The offer stands for 1 week. If I don't hear from your fiduciary by then, it expires. And with that I walked out, Vanessa beside me. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had finally learned. Standing up for yourself doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like peace. We didn't speak right away after leaving the restaurant. The tension still clung to our coats like fog as we stepped into the cold evening air. The Charles River shimmered beside us, its surface calm, indifferent, eternal. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets and stared straight ahead. Want to sit? Vanessa asked, nodding toward a bench facing the water. I nodded and we sat, side by side, quiet. Two grown women shaped by the same storm, finally choosing to stop pretending it hadn't soaked us both. She broke the silence first. You were amazing in there. I gave a weak smile. I wasn't trying to be amazing, just clear. You were. And they hate clarity. She exhaled a shaky breath. It cuts through their fantasy. I turned to her. Why did you come? I wasn't sure I should, she admitted. But when you texted me, I realized. This might be the first time in our lives we're not being played against each other. That hit hard. 'Cause it was true. Our whole childhood had been a competition neither of us signed up for. Me playing the invisible achiever, her the golden child expected to sparkle on command. And when we each stepped out of our roles, the entire family structure started to crack. I've been thinking about that day, she said after a while. The day of the wedding. I didn't respond. Just let the breeze move between us. You know what I remember most, she continued. The photographer asked for a family shot. Mom said, just the three of us. I turned to look at her surprised. She nodded. I didn't push back. I should have. I regret that more than the dress, the flowers, everything. I looked back at the water. We were taught that speaking up meant ruining things. Yeah, she said softly. But staying quiet ruined us too. Silence again. But this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like soil, ready for something new to grow. Vanessa reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. I don't know if it's weird, but I wrote you something. I hesitated, then took it. I've never written a letter to anyone before, she said with a nervous laugh. I figured you might prefer it that way. No interruptions. No explanations. I nodded, my throat tight. She stood. I'll let you read it when you're ready. Just, don't wait another 3 years to text me, okay? Okay, I said. She gave me a soft smile. For the record, I always knew you were stronger than all of them. I just didn't know how to be your sister and compete with you at the same time. I looked up at her. We don't have to compete anymore. She nodded. Good. I'm tired of playing someone else's game. As she walked away, I unfolded the letter and started reading. The first line made me cry. To the sister I should have chosen sooner. In that moment I realized that not all families heal. But sometimes siblings do. And that's enough to start something new. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when I got the call. I was at my desk at the Heart Forward Foundation, sipping lukewarm tea and reviewing quarterly grant applications. The office was calm. Sunlight filtering through the blinds, the hum of the printer, my assistant Mia typing softly at the front desk. Then my work phone rang. Mia peeked in. It's Carol from Intake. Says you should take it. Carol never flagged calls unless it mattered. Picked up. Hey Carol. What's up? There was a pause. I could hear her clicking through something. I wasn't going to call, but then I saw the name. Thought you'd want to handle this one personally. I stiffened. Thomas Hartman, she said. Submitted an intake form for patient funding support. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. He listed Heart Forward as a referral source. Didn't mention your name directly, but there's no way he doesn't know. He filled out everything. Diagnosis, estimated costs, surgical timeline. Looks like he's applying for the full $20,000 coverage. Closed my eyes. Did he qualify? Technically, yes. Meets all the criteria. Financial threshold. Medical urgency. No duplicate aid. Of course he qualified. He always knew how to perform for the people who held the keys. And this time I held them. Carol paused again. Do you want me to escalate this or pass it to the review committee? The committee. That was the protocol I'd put in place, intentionally removing myself from individual funding decisions to avoid personal bias. The irony wasn't lost on me. But this wasn't a personal decision anymore. It was a test of the system I'd built. I exhaled slowly. Keep it with the committee. If he qualifies, he qualifies. You sure? Yes, I said, steady now. I don't want him to think this foundation is about me. It's about fairness. It always has been. Understood. I hung up and stared out the window. My fingers hovered over my keyboard before I typed 3 words into his application record. Process as usual. No favoritism. No anger. Just structure. Just the kind of support I wish I'd had back then. That afternoon I sat with it all. His application, the past, the scar that still itched sometimes when it rained. And I realized, maybe healing doesn't mean forgetting. Maybe it means creating something that works, even when it has to work for them. Because that's real strength. Not revenge. But resilience. The church wasn't grand, but it glowed. Soft string lights laced around the beams. Mason jars with wildflowers lined the aisle. And Zoe, my best friend, my anchor, my constant, stood at the front in a satin dress the color of honey, practically vibrating with joy. Her wedding day. And somehow I was her maid of honor. Not her sister. Not a cousin. Me. The backup kid who was always last on the list. Now the first she trusted with her vows. I watched from the side as she walked down the aisle toward Zach, who was already tearing up like the human Labrador he was. And I couldn't help but feel it, the surreal weight of how far I'd come. There were no Hartmans in the pews. No mother gripping pearls. No stepfather pretending to approve. They weren't invited. But the front rows. Filled. Mia from the foundation. Dr. Shaw from school. Parker and his husband. Vanessa, sitting between 2 of her co-workers, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. People who had stepped in where others stepped out. My chosen family. The ceremony was short, sweet, full of laughter and inside jokes. But it was the reception that cracked something open in me. Zoe tapped her glass with a fork, stood with her mic and said, "Before I dance with my husband, I need to thank someone." She turned to me. "Natalie Hartman. You saved me more times than I can count. You reminded me I deserved real love. That boundaries don't mean bitterness. They mean survival. And when my own family wavered, you stood still." My cheeks burned. I shook my head. She ignored me. "So this dance," she said. "I'm sharing it." She reached out her hand. And we danced. In front of everyone. No one judged. No one whispered. The music was soft. Familiar. Zoe squeezed my hand halfway through and whispered, "You were never anyone's backup, Nat. You were just too bright for the spotlight they gave you." I didn't cry. But my heart did something better. It healed. Later I stepped outside for air, heels in hand, moonlight washing over the grass. I sat on a bench just beyond the garden lights. Reed appeared a moment later, late as usual, suit wrinkled, tie crooked, holding a cupcake in each hand. "You left before cake," he said, handing me one. "Not hungry," I replied, though I took it anyway. He sat beside me, quiet. "Hard day?" he asked. "No," I said, surprising myself. "Actually, it's a really, really good one." He smiled. "You built something beautiful, you know." "Not alone," I said. "But yeah, I did." We sat in silence. Comfortable. Real. And somewhere inside me, the final brick of that old wall, the one built on rejection, dismissal, and forgotten birthdays, finally crumbled. I hadn't just survived. Created something better. Not despite them. But because of what I'd had to become without them. The next morning, I woke up in a sunlit guest room at Zoe's house. The kind of soft morning where the sheets are warm, and the world feels gentle again. There was no missed call from my mother. No apology email from Thomas. No sudden realization from either of them that they'd been wrong all along. And I didn't need one. Because that girl who once sat at the family dinner table quietly shrinking while her brother was celebrated. She wasn't here anymore. She'd been replaced. By a woman who had stood in a room with the people who dismissed her, and didn't flinch. By a woman who said no, not with cruelty, but with clarity. By someone who didn't need revenge to feel powerful. Just peace. Later that week, the Heart Forward Review Committee approved Thomas's grant. No one on the team knew his relationship to me. I'd made sure of that. He received the same amount, the same counseling, the same recovery checklist as every other applicant. And when the check was mailed, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pride either. I just felt finished. That chapter closed itself not with a bang, but with paperwork, quiet dignity, and zero drama. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I built a life I wasn't invited to. Then I opened the door for others who had felt the same way. Heart Forward became more than a support foundation. It became a symbol of what happens when the backup kids stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing themselves. And every time a donation came in or a patient sent us a thank you card, I smiled. Because it meant we were making noise in all the places where silence used to live. Today I don't think about what I missed out on. I think about what I gained. Career built from survival. Friendships forged in truth. A sister I'm learning to know for real. Not just as the girl who got everything, but as the woman brave enough to own her flaws and start over. And most of all, I think about what it means to rewrite your story. Not for them. For you. So if you're reading this or hearing this, and you've ever been the backup plan, the forgotten one, the afterthought, here's what I'll tell you. You're not too late. You're not too small. You're not too much. You were never the problem. You were just surrounded by people too afraid to see how powerful you really were. But that ends the moment you decide it does. Because when you choose yourself, unapologetically, without asking permission, you are never second again. You are everything. And no one can take that away.